like it's important to be playful as well and kind of explore and try different things and be spontaneous every now and again and things like that. It's that what kind of keeps it alive.
Exactly.
You know, it's easy, as you said, it's easy for us to get into habit and
you don't get stuck in ruts.
And again, that sometimes requires effort, and we have to put effort into relationships, or otherwise we won't have any relationships.
This podcast is part of the GK Media Studios Creators Network, helping people tell their stories. Become a storyteller today and learn about our podcaster network at gkmediastudios.com.
Welcome to Psychology with a Sparkle. This is episode 4, and I'm delighted to be joined today by rapid transformational therapist, RTT therapist, and mindset coach, and long-term good pal, Lynda Duffy. Welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here.
Thanks a million for joining me. So for everybody who's listening in, will you let people know a little bit, even my own awareness? I know that RTT kind of stemmed from Marissa Peer, didn't it, that lady?
Correct.
So will you just kind of fill people in a little bit?
Yeah, so rapid transformational therapy, RTT for short, is a hybrid mix of cognitive behavioral therapy, neuroplasticity, and hypnosis. And essentially what it does, it helps people uncover root causes of perhaps challenges that they have and any kind of limiting self-beliefs that they may have, and help them transform into having more healthier coping mechanisms and stronger, more positive self-beliefs essentially, and good, positive, healthy beliefs.
Brilliant.
So in a nutshell, that's what it is. So I would work with people who would perhaps suffer with anxiety or low mood, confidence. I also work in collaboration with Horse Race in Ireland, working with their licensed jockey around resilience, high pressure situations, and any of the challenges that any of us would have. So that's primarily what I focus on.
Fantastic. Brilliant. So today we're here for a whole other subject choice. We're here to talk about all things sex related and relationships. So no better guest.
Why?
So I was saying to you just before we started that I was trying to think in my head, okay, what way will we kind of configure this? So I reckon the best way to do it is to kind of feedback on the questions that I was asked in the 2 question boxes I put up on Instagram.
Sure.
So the first thing that came through in a question box was to talk about all things. That's why, initially we were talking about doing a podcast on relationships, but the first thing that came through was all things sex. So I thought, okay, we're just going to have to address it. Yeah. So I suppose maybe one of the first questions that might be worth teasing out is, how important do you think sex is in relationships?
I think it depends on the individuals in the relationship. So I think for some people, sex is really important. And for other people, it's not as important as maybe other factors within the relationship. So I think what's important if you are going into a relationship is understanding what are the needs of the other person and if you're able to match those needs. So what I would notice a lot with coming maybe people that I work with where they have relationship issues or intimacy issues is typically those needs aren't getting met. And it causes a lot of kind of friction, or it causes a lot of tension within the relationship. And a lot of the time they're just afraid to kind of even open up that conversation because maybe they've done it before and there hasn't been any changes, or maybe they're afraid that they'll hurt the other person's feelings or things like that. But I think it's really important before you decide to settle down properly with someone to understand, well, what are your sexual desires, or like
to have those conversations.
Yeah, like how sexually active do you want to be, or what's your desire around that? So at least you can understand, well, if you're someone who has a high sex drive and I don't, we're probably not going to work out, or somebody will have to kind of compromise in some shape or form. So I think it's important to communicate.
Exactly. And there's no getting away from it. I think, like, I was doing a podcast recently, and like that, the 2 guys were asking me kind of questions in relation to the chapter in my book in relation to sex. And like, it's that whole thing of like sex, whether you're having it or you're not having it, it complicates everything. It takes everything to a different level in terms of relationships. And I suppose it is, going back to, like we'll say, in terms of from a psychological evolutionary point even, like on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's right there with basic needs like food, water, sleep. Like, you know, we're sexual beings. We're not just human beings, we're sexual beings. And like even in terms of the area of the brain that's associated with sex drive, like it's below the level of emotion, it's below the level of cognition. It's in the reptilian core of the brain. So it's really primal, you know, and that's even from a physiological perspective. So there is no getting away from it. And as you said, like, I think rather than kind of shutting the curtains and pretending it doesn't exist or that we shy away from those kinds of conversations, to not be afraid to kind of just like that, have more open conversations and express what it is that you like or dislike with your partner.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a few kind of maybe elements to what you said there, as well as there's some people that are just completely asexual. And that's nothing to shy away from. If you're asexual, you're asexual. And on the flip side, it's there's I think there's a lot of maybe societal pressure around, well, how many times should you be having sex in a healthy relationship?
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, again, society doesn't tell us what's right for my relationship if I'm in a relationship with somebody.
Each individual.
Yeah, and it's kind of understanding, well, what's right for us and what's right maybe for your relationship might not be right for my relationship, and that doesn't mean I'm right or you're right or I'm wrong and you're wrong. It's we're all unique and we all have different needs, but
and it's down to the quality as well.
Exactly,
like it's not just always about
and it's about, you know, do I feel comfortable and safe with this person? Am I enjoying it? Can they meet my needs? Can I
meet their needs?
Yeah, and can I feel comfortable enough to say, well, that doesn't, you know, that doesn't feel nice, or that doesn't do anything for me, and maybe try this, or this feels nice, or whatever. Being able to kind of be open and honest, and that's where I think where you'll have the real intimacy and enjoyment out of it is feeling safe and feeling comfortable and vulnerable enough to be kind of be able to have those conversations and be confident, I suppose, in your own body as well.
Exactly. And I think, like, sex is always better when there's a strong emotional connection, when it's not just, you know, solely. I mean, you know, it'll last the distance for maybe, you know, 12 to 18 months if it's just based on sex. But after that, like it'll burn out, you know, so there has to be kind of other stuff that's going to support the relationship as well, you know. Yeah. So another question that came through was, why do people settle for mediocrity in relationships? So
I love that question. I think people are afraid. I think it's people are afraid to be on their own. They're afraid to be left on the shelf, or they're afraid that maybe they won't meet somebody else. So sometimes it's easier to just maybe have somebody that ticks, you know, a good few of the boxes, and you kind of ignore maybe all the things that they, maybe traits that they have or the way they make you feel, because you think the good parts outweigh maybe the things that aren't so good. So I think for a lot of people, it's fear of, you know, maybe sometimes it's better to have somebody than nobody.
Can also be habit.
Yeah. And it could be kind of maybe self-beliefs. Maybe that's what, depending on the environment that they've grown up, maybe that's what they know of. Maybe their parental relationships, that's how their parents were. So that's maybe their view or belief of what relationships should look like. But I think it's important as well to recognize that if you're somebody that's comfortable with settling, that's okay. You know, if you're okay with that, then fine. Like that, we're all different, we're all unique. So, you know, I might be okay with settling and you mightn't, right? So again, it's well, I'm not as well, but it's kind of understanding, like, what are you okay with and what are you not, you know? And if your fear is stronger than your desire to take a chance on meeting someone else, then so be it. But I think that's primarily why people settle. It's fear.
I think it's fear, but it's also can be a lack of confidence for people, you know, I think, or that feeling of, you know, if I put myself out there again, what's that going to feel like, you know? And when you're like that in that comfort zone, it's more of a safe space, I think, for people. And I think comfort zones are probably, you know, the worst addiction that you can ever find yourself in, you know?
Yeah, and I think some people as well, they they feel like maybe they don't deserve any better than what they have. They feel maybe that's all
self-worth issue.
Yeah, they feel like that's all they're worthy of. But again, as you said, that comes back to like, you know, your confidence, your self-esteem, and you know that, you know, we're all lovable. So it's just a case of, you know, what, again, it's that self-respect part. What do I deserve? What am I worthy of?
Yeah. And I think oftentimes, you know, people talk about self-love a lot online or whatever, but like, I always think that it starts with self-respect. Sometimes self-love is a stretch too far for people. So if you can actually help them to kind of start respecting themselves more, start building their self-esteem, start working on themselves through, you know, whatever, engaging in their own kind of hobbies and activities and meeting up with friends and all of that, so that they feel better about themselves. And then that's the version of themselves that they're bringing to the relationship, you know.
Yeah. I think it's important as well when you go into a new relationship is, and I definitely would have been guilty of this in the past, where you always go in thinking like, oh, I have to be the best version of myself. And I can't show like that maybe I'm maybe a little bit insecure or a little bit anxious. That's okay, I think, now to kind of go into a relationship and to kind of tell them how you're feeling, and maybe things that make you nervous, that maybe if you're out until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and you don't text me, that makes me feel really anxious. I think you should be able to, at the start, be able to say those kind of things, because the right person will take that on board.
I actually wrote about that in my book.
Okay.
Anxious attachment style.
Yeah. And that for me is a big one, because all you're doing is, this is things that make me feel nervous or make me feel anxious. And the right person will be like, okay, well, I don't want you to feel like that, so I'll text you and tell you whatever, you know. So I think, I think sometimes people shy away from that because they think
there's also complacency. You know, when people just become complacent in a relationship, when they just kind of start taking each other for granted. Yeah. And like that, you know, those things that might have kind of featured very highly in the early stages, you know, become a thing of the past or not. You know, maybe there's kind of red flags from the start, which leads me nicely into the next question, which is around identifying red flags. The two of us in red in the early stages. Well, no, this is our because this is the Christmas podcast. This is our
Christmas spirit.
So, but, you know, like that, identifying red flags in relationships and how to become a better judge. Actually, the question specifically that came through was, you know, how to kind of be a better judge of people, you know, and how to be a better judge of character. So I've got lots to say about that, but I would like to hear what you think.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you kind of have to know yourself first and be aware of yourself first before you can kind of understand maybe other people. In terms of red flags, I think, again, I think sometimes we dismiss red flags because we maybe see the potential in somebody as opposed to who they actually really are and how they're presenting themselves currently.
In reality,
yeah. And a lot of the time we can think, or people can think, well, you know, I can change them, you know, and the thing is you can't.
No.
You know, so
you can influence them.
You can influence them and you can guide them, but like at the end of the day, you can't change them the same way they can't change us if we don't want to change, or we think there's maybe nothing wrong with us in the first place. But I would say in terms of, I think particularly for women as well, like our intuition and our gut feeling is, for me, it's a very strong factor that I would use and something that I would rely on and that I would trust. So if something feels off, most likely it is off.
Yeah. And I think Oprah, who I absolutely love, but she often quotes Maya Angelou, and she apparently had said to Oprah this saying or quote or whatever years ago, which Oprah often talks about, and that is that when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. Because more than likely, you know, like that, there will be repeat patterns or repeat versions, you know, and unless somebody undergoes their own personal transformation and that person decides to undertake the work that they need to take to get past whatever it is that's making them behave in a certain way that's jeopardizing the relationship, then it's just not going to work, you know?
Yeah, and I think there has to be kind of probably an element of trial and error as well, to a point that, you know, we all make mistakes. We all, you know, learn when we go into a new relationship and different dynamics of different people and their personalities. But it's at what point do you decide that this isn't right and this person's going to change, versus, okay, we're working on something together and we're changing and learning as we go, and finding the balance of, well, when is it not right, and when is it, we're still getting to know each other.
And not being afraid to kind of, like that, back to kind of what we were talking about just in the last discussion, that, not being afraid to actually let go of something. If it doesn't feel right, it more than likely isn't.
Yeah. I think, like, with a lot of people that I work with as individuals, I don't really do couple work, but it's the communication. Communication is such, like, it's probably the biggest thing that affects relationships, whether it's romantic or not. It's not communicating what you're feeling, or how somebody, how you react to how maybe somebody's behavior. If you can't communicate, then you're assuming they know how you're feeling.
Yeah.
And we all know that. But
then, like, what happens, like, because there are so many, and again, I feel like I'm picking on the men a bit between the last podcast and this one, and it's not in a derogatory way, but men in general do find it more difficult to communicate their feelings. So it can be more difficult for them to open up. And oftentimes their love language isn't, that verbal aspect, it can be more of a physical nature,
Yeah.
So it does, I suppose, require a lot of patience as well, and realizing what your deal breakers are, in a relationship, and what you're prepared to throw over your shoulder, and what is absolutely, this is just going to kill the relationship altogether.
Yeah. And I guess it comes back to, like, what are your needs? If, like, emotional communication is something that you really need, and someone doesn't have that, then long term there's going to be a lot of frustration, a lot of probably arguments. So again, as you said, it's kind of deciding, what are my deal breakers, what are my non-negotiables, and either accept the person for how they are.
Yeah. And it's also kind of, I think it's, I'm always quoting Esther Perel, but she's brilliant in terms of relationships. And, like, she talks about this idea that even when, like, there's going to be conflict in every relationship, but even when there is a conflict, regardless of whose fault it is, both people, if you're invested in that relationship, both people should be invested in trying to resolve whatever the issue is.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be about pointing the finger of blame one person to another, It's about, okay, we're both invested in this. We're in it for the long term, if you are,
yes. Yeah.
And so let's try and resolve this, regardless of who was actually more at fault than the other person,
Yeah, exactly. And it's about kind of like, it's kind of like, what's the solution as opposed to the blame game, because it's easy to get into the blame game and, it's your fault this or your fault that, but
there's nothing resolved.
No.
When you start, pointing the fingers at each other. Another question that came through, which was the impact of low self-worth on sex, on people's sex life. And again, a lot of clients would talk to me about, like, that when they're not feeling good or confident about themselves in terms of their body image, and how that impacts them, and how they avoid sex altogether, because they're afraid to kind of be in that. Because, I mean, it's the most vulnerable, I think, that one of the most vulnerable positions we'll ever, if you'll excuse the term.
The pun.
But, that we'll ever be. And so it's kind of like finding that way to allow yourself to just, not judge yourself, because you're never going to be able to kind of let down your guard and fully connect with somebody in any sense if you have that fear of negative appraisal, in terms of your body. But with that, I always say to people as well, you need to do whatever you need to do to help yourself to enhance your own self-image. Your partner isn't going to be able to do that for you. You need to do that for yourself. Would you agree with that?
100%.
Yeah.
And look, it's normal and natural for both males and females to be body conscious, and as you said, they're seeing you at your most vulnerable, really. Yeah. But I think essentially to kind of have that confidence in those kind of situations where you are, they're seeing you for who you are, is you have to have, that's, again, it comes back to kind of self-belief, self-care, and high self-esteem in yourself, in that confidence in the bedroom is not necessarily about having the perfect body. It's
Absolutely.
just being comfortable in who you are and what you are. And I think when you go into relationships as well, it's, you know, when you have sex for the first time in a relationship, it kind of varies for different people as well. But if you can kind of get to know somebody, even if it's just lying in bed and being with that person, that will, I think, will naturally allow you to become more comfortable and confident around that person when you're just spending time with them in some kind of intimate shape or form, but not necessarily maybe having sex. So that would be the kind of one thing I would say. And two, you just have to learn to actually love yourself. And sometimes that just means maybe
more self-care.
Yeah. And like none of us love our body all the time, no matter what shape or size you are. And sometimes you just have to appreciate that this is my body. And equally other times, if you want to change it, then that requires actually proactively making changes to change your body.
Exactly.
You know,
so making the most of things. You know, so that you feel as confident as you possibly can.
Yeah. And I think as well, it's, you know, as you said, it's not about the other person. They can only give so much to make you feel confident or make you feel beautiful or make you feel sexy or any of those things.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you have to work on yourself to feel those things yourself.
You're not going to be able to accept those compliments if you don't have a level of self-respect.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter who says it to you. If you don't feel it, you don't feel it.
Exactly.
So you have to work on yourself.
Push it away, actually.
Yeah. So whether that means changing your diet, maybe increasing your exercising, or just increasing your self-esteem, where you accept your body for what it is and actually thank your body for all the functions it does besides looking good naked when you're with somebody. You know, it keeps you alive, it lets you breathe, all of these things. So appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose, you know, that just what you were saying there about, you know, maybe as a first step to kind of be comfortable with somebody, you know, just even like in a non-sexual way, that sometimes, like say for couples that I would work with who maybe are having difficulty in terms of their sexual intimacy, that there are certain bits of homework that I give them in terms of like that, getting comfortable with each other again. And that might be just something as simple as a massage, but it's touch, you know, or just having like a sense of closeness, you know. But I suppose there's no getting away from the fact that, you know, sex, we'd say in the female sense. So for us, we release, well, for both parties, we release serotonin, dopamine, but for us specifically, we release oxytocin. And all of those chemicals are associated with lowering your stress levels, but also bonding you to the person. And then for the men, they release a chemical called vasopressin, and they also release serotonin and dopamine. So it's the vasopressin. That's what actually helps them to bond. So it is a very powerful act. Like I always say, like people can sometimes like be quite flippant about it, but actually that's why women invariably will bond quicker, you know, in some cases when they actually have sexual intercourse with a guy than men. It takes them longer. But you know, I suppose those things are worth considering, again, from a physiological perspective, like the actual impacts of sex or whatever. Okay, so we've covered how to be a better judge of people. So in terms of comfort zones and how they impact couples and relationships, and that was another question that came through. So getting out of comfort zones. What do you think about that as it relates to people's, how do you think it impacts people's sex life?
I wonder what did they mean by out of the comfort zone? Try different things or what?
I think, well, my impression was it was to do with maybe, you know, when you're this was to do with long-term relationships, but when you're in a long-term relationship that you kind of find yourself getting into kind of comfort zones, and I suppose sex gets put on the back burner, and then oftentimes that can impact the relationship, whether that's because one party goes off and has an affair or whatever the case is. But I mean, I think comfort zones are like whether you're single or in a relationship, I think it's a bad idea to allow yourself to get into comfort zones anyway.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to effort. Like relationships are effort. No matter how good the relationship is, everybody has to work on it. And so sometimes that means, you know, the times you don't want to have sex, you have to. you know, because if you want to,
Would you believe that?
yeah, I think like if you want to have like a certain amount of a healthy relationship, that like if you're someone that's not, let's say if you don't have a high sex drive,
Yeah.
and your partner does,
Yeah.
or even let's say call it an average, whatever average is, right? That
You're talking about frequency.
In a way, yeah, that like if like sex is part of a romantic relationship.
Yeah.
And there's times, I know that definitely times in my relationships where I was too tired, or I just didn't want to, but I was like, well, my partner wants to, and that's going to make them happy. So I'll kind of just do it.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's finding that balance of those times where we, you know, sometimes you might need to have sex where you mightn't want to have sex for the sake of the relationship, or making, you know, that's going to make them happy.
Yeah.
know?
But I think it's also about finding, because like, I always think like that's what defines you as a romantic couple, is the sexual intimacy piece. Like otherwise they're just your friend, you know, maybe a friend with benefits. So like, I think if you don't want to be intimate with somebody, you know, fair enough, like maybe in terms of frequency, it might decrease a little bit as you go through life.
Yeah.
But I suppose, you know, to kind of ask yourself the questions around, well, why? What is it? Like, is it that I don't desire my partner as much? Is it that, again, is it to do with myself in terms of my own self-esteem, my own confidence? Is it that, you know, I don't feel good in my own skin? But to ask, to be brave enough to kind of ask those questions of yourself, because I think what ends up happening is, you know, if you keep kind of feeling, I don't feel like it, or I don't feel like it, you know, that can then lead to absence of sex for couples altogether. And then that has devastating consequences.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, 100%. And it's a reality. Like whether it's talking to clients or even friendships or even my own previous relationships, there's so many people that are in relationships where actually even younger people, you know, it's not just people who have been in relationships for years and years and years, that they don't have a sex life.
Yeah.
You know, and you'll find actually a lot of couples, particularly when they get married, then sex becomes all about having babies.
Yeah.
And it's actually not for, it's not for actual insta-me or fun. It's like, well, we're having sex now because like I'm ovulating and we're having a baby. Yeah. And that's the only time I want to try and have a child.
And that can put huge pressure on couples.
Yeah, like, absolutely. It's a lot of stress, but definitely there's so many relationships where people's sexual frequency or desires aren't equal. And as you said, it causes 100%. So many problems. And as you said, that leads to, you know, sometimes really devastating consequences. Yeah. But again, if you're asking yourself, why is it that I don't desire my partner? Is it that I don't feel comfortable in myself? Or where's that lack come from? Or is it just that I don't have the same sexual desire as my partner does? Then you have to, again, like as a couple, decide, well, are we compatible then with each other?
Yeah, yeah. And I think, you know, like sometimes because those first kind of 18 months to 2 years can be highly active in terms of your sexual activity with somebody, that the cracks only really start to show in that respect after that time. And if people kind of, you know, get married quite quickly or whatever, you know, they may end up like in that type of, unless you actually, you know, address the elephant in the room and start to talk about it, like what's happening here, you know, that things can rapidly go downhill for people, and that they do find themselves almost like, friends. You know, people describe themselves as best friends. Yeah. You know.
Yeah. And then I suppose to throw a spanner in the works, then there's the kind of question of, well, is that what a relationship is meant to be? So some people would see it.
It's an important part.
Yeah.
I think it's an important part. And I think I would absolutely agree with you. And again, I've written this in my chapter on sex in the book, that it's not that it's a one size fits all. Like everybody, you know, every couple will find their own unique way of how they, you know, how they like to kind of their sexual intimacy life to be. But I think there's no getting away from it, you know, and that, like, as I said, it is that piece that defines you as a romantic couple. So if you know, decide to kind of take that step and be in a relationship with somebody, you know, if you decide after a period of time, well, actually, you know, we're kind of happy sleeping in separate bedrooms and just, you know, bringing up our children and working, maybe both people are working and there's just not much interest. But my experience, you know, is that one or both parties will end up finding, you know, alternative avenues to fulfill their sexual desires if it's not addressed within the relationship.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah. So it's it's kind of all encompassing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't think there's never a right answer for like I say, like what's right for you might be not right for me and things like that. So you have to kind of figure out, well, what is right for you as an individual, but also what's right for you if you're going to be a long-term couple and have a sustainable, healthy, happy relationship.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's a case of, you know, also knowing when you get to a point where this isn't working.
Yeah. What do you think about one night stands?
In what way?
In every way.
I'm indifferent.
That's a cop-out answer.
Yeah, it is. What do I think of one night stands? Not personally, not for me.
Same as.
But if that's what you're into, fire away. Like I don't, whatever, you know. If you can, if it's no strings attached and you can actually genuinely manage that, then
walk away.
Then you know, do your thing. But for me, I need more than just physical attraction. There has to be some bit of substance behind it. So
yeah. But also, again, I think it's kind of like that it just there has to be a level of safety for me as well. Like I just, you know, it's never been kind of comfortable space for me to just, and again, no judgment, you know, each to their own. But to just jump into the bed with somebody that I've met for the first time, you know.
Yeah.
But again, and do you think they're you know, more sort of tend to head in that make those kinds of choices more so than women?
I think nowadays it's actually equal measure. You'd be surprised the amount of guys that actually lack confidence as well in terms of sexual confidence and things like that. Yeah. And sometimes we kind of maybe forget that. Yeah. You know.
Well, I'm reminded of it in my work, in my private work, I suppose. You know, that there's an awful lot of guys. And I think that's kind of influenced by things like too much, you know, watching porn too much and then not being able to perform and expectations.
Yeah, unrealistic expectations.
Way too high.
Yeah.
And then just not, you know, being so anxious that they're, you know, it causes difficulty then when they actually do meet somebody that they genuinely like. Yeah. You know? I think like that, it's just sex complicates everything. You know, it definitely does. And I think that conversations like this are definitely what people need to be having, you know.
Would you have conversations about sex with your friends? I know we do, obviously, but like, would you find that like your friends or friends even, would they be open about having conversations about sex with their partners or
like my close friends? Yeah, you know, but not even that much, really. You know, I think it is a very personal thing. You know, it is a very personal thing, but I don't know. I don't know if that's a good idea either. Kind of, you know, talking very openly, because it is such a private part of your relationship, you know. I don't know how comfortable I would feel about, you know, if I was with somebody very significant, that if they were kind of talking to their friends about our sex life, I don't think that certainly wouldn't rock my world.
Yeah, it wouldn't go down well.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Do you think that having a good sex life nourishes the relationship? Do you think it makes things easier, better?
I don't know if it makes it easier or better, but I definitely think it makes you more connected. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And it kind of enhances the kind of playful aspect between.
Yeah, and that's another thing. It's like it's important to be playful as well and kind of explore and try different things and be spontaneous every now and again and things like that. It's that what kind of keeps it alive.
Exactly.
You know, it's easy, as you said, it's easy for us to get into habit, and
you don't get stuck in ruts.
Yeah. And again, that sometimes requires effort, and we have to put effort into relationships, or otherwise we won't have any relationships.
Yeah, 100%.
So
yeah, but I think people are afraid to, you know, even kind of entertain the idea of like whatever, whether it's trying different positions or sex toys or dress up, whatever it is, you know, adding kind of an element of mystery, you know, that's kind of like, it's like beyond a lot of people's kind of comprehension. And again, I think it's again, not a judgment. It's more a fear that because maybe they've never done anything like that before or whatever, that it's kind of like, oh God, you know, I couldn't possibly kind of even...
Yeah, and I think again it comes back to communication. When you first like started dating somebody, you should kind of have an awareness of like what do they enjoy, what are they into, what do they not like, things like that. Because I don't think
it's hard to have those conversations at the very early stages.
Well, it depends what you mean by early. You know, I can maybe have it on the first drink that you have with somebody, but I think it's definitely important to have those conversations so you know that what you're getting into. But
you kind of know, don't you? You know
by their vibe as well.
Yeah, you do.
And that's another thing. Energy. You just know when you vibe with somebody, or you're connected in some way, or just your, whether you want to call it frequency or energy, whatever you want to call it, you can feel it. You can feel the energy. You can feel the electricity. Maybe if I'm allowed to use that word, you can just feel
it's sexual energy.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And that's it's chemistry actually. You know, that, and you feel that literally within, you know, it's not, sometimes it can burn out very fast.
Yeah.
But you do feel it, like that's what I suppose everybody is looking for in the online dating world. It's like that, you know, that elusive spark, you know, on the first date. And then, I mean, I know I'm guilty of this, that if I don't feel it, it's like, see ya.
Yeah.
Which isn't always the right thing either, you know.
He looked at me the wrong way, I'm leaving.
No, but it's that energy force. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That you kind of can feel like whether it's attraction, actually. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's attraction. And again, it's kind of finding the balance between, is this just attraction versus is this attraction plus compatibility, you know?
So do you think that we should kind of give people a second or a third chance, you know, if they are not so, if you don't feel that sense of, if you're not vibing with somebody on the first date, do you think that it is worthwhile having a second or a third date? Do you think that feelings like that can grow? Because some people would sort of say, well, sometimes, you know, like maybe you should think about a slow burn and, you know.
Yeah, look, for me personally, no. I pretty know much, I know straight away.
Yeah.
If there's any element of maybe I'm not sure, yes, second date. But after the second date, I'll tend to know that there's maybe something in this or there isn't.
Yeah.
And again, it's about like how aware you are of yourself and your feelings, and do you trust your feelings?
Yeah.
Some people just, they aren't there. They haven't that awareness of themselves. So maybe they need to go on 3 or 4 states to understand, is there maybe something in this, or am I overlooking certain things, or am I not giving them a chance?
Maybe they need to kiss the person.
Yeah. Things like
that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's about kind of, it's all trial and error. And what my method mightn't be your method. And
what's your method?
First of all, I need to go on a date. That's my first method, to actually make an effort to go on a date. After that, it's just 2 things. Do I feel comfortable talking to the person?
Yeah.
Do I feel I can be myself and not have to hide who I really am? Will they accept me for who I am? And is there attraction? Am I actually like attracted to this person?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to want to get into the bed, not on the first date, obviously, but you have to want to kind of feel as though like that is, you know, if that's absent, then I don't know like how long you're supposed to kind of wait things out, or I'm, you know, absolutely. I think that sometimes we can kind of miss people in all of their glory if we dismiss them too fast, and that sometimes like people, there can end up being somebody that kind of takes you from left field, and you kind of go, okay, actually I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think that's a big thing as well when we talk about dating. And unfortunately, when you're online dating, a lot of it is visual. and you could meet the most amazing person in person and have an amazing connection. Well, if you saw them online, you might absolutely swipe.
Yeah.
I forget. Is it swipe left if you're not interested? It's been so long, I forget now what's what. That you like, unfortunately, like we're in that world now where we do rely, I think, for the most part on online dating.
Yeah.
That it's, it's
not
the healthiest form.
Well, yeah, like it's kind of, it gets talked about a lot. Like, I know all of the podcasts that I've done outside of my own podcast, like it has come up as a topic of discussion. And I think there's nobody seems to be satisfied with the world of online dating. But then it's kind of like, what's the alternative? Because people aren't going out as much as they were before. They're not as inclined to mix in the same way as we would have done maybe. Again, I don't really want to go on about COVID, but pre-COVID, there was definitely a bit more mingling. And I think people are shyer about coming forward, that whole kind of social anxiety piece, because they're on screens so much, and it's like that.
Yeah, they forget how to communicate.
Yeah. Big time.
I think there's an element of trying different things. Like I, as you know, I'm not somebody that would go out a whole lot. So for me, the whole idea of kind of like going to bars and things like that, let's say if you're specifically hoping to meet somebody, it's not something that I would gravitate towards. I'd be more likely to maybe go to different events or go to
where you're more likely to meet
where it doesn't feel like it's going to be like you're out looking to meet somebody. It's more, if it's a hobby, well, I enjoy I know you enjoy rugby, so like you're...
Well, it's not so much that, like, I grew up in a rugby house, so like that's kind of...
But you might gravitate towards go something like that where you're going more likely to be somebody who enjoys that as well. So you'll have like an instant kind of like connection, or you'll have something that you can actually have a topic that you can talk about.
Again, I'd be only looking on the screen.
Yeah. Well, you need to get out more.
Since my dad's passing, he used to get me rugby tickets, so I used to go to some of the internationals.
You need to find somebody who gets tickets then. Yeah, you need to expand your circle. But I think it's just trying different things, going to different places. Ask people as well. Like, do you know anyone? Like, I do it. I was like, do you know anyone single? Like,
do you?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't
because they'd
bother me
know
at all.
you well. I suppose they'd know.
Yeah, I'd be only asking the people that know me well. Like, do you know anyone that that I could be a good fit for or whatever? Like, is there anybody?
They've never asked me that.
You don't trust your judgment. I think you just have to be kind of like put yourself out there. It's really hard, and I'm absolutely guilty of it myself.
Yeah.
But as I say, nobody's going to find you on your couch.
Yeah, no, you can't. Like, they're not going to arrive at your door. You have to put in the same amount of effort and time into dating as you do with every other aspect of your life.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean rocking up in a tracksuit bottoms or a pair of leggings. Make an effort. And it's the same for the guys. You know, they're arriving in a fleece and
cowboy boots.
Yeah, which leads me nicely to this, because this came in, and this was you who sent this question in, because I told you this story. So actually, no, before I tell that story, I'm going to ask you about, have you got any funny first date stories?
You won't like the answer, but I don't. I actually don't.
Make one up.
Oh, for God's sake. How can I make it up on the spot? I actually don't. Like, I actually have been quite lucky
with first dates.
I've never really had like a bad first date. Yeah. I actually genuinely haven't. I've been lucky in that way, and I've never been catfished. I've never had any of those experiences that a lot of people have. So I don't know if that's just luck or whatever, but equally, I suppose I probably don't have any first funny stories, because I probably haven't gone on a whole load of dates since I've been single. You know, it's just it's probably just lack of effort as well. You know, I just yeah. You tell your story; it's much funnier.
Okay. Well, this one kind of stands out. There's been a few buttes, but this one kind of stands out. So this guy, it was actually Instagram, I think he contacted me on. But he was one of these profiles that, you know, he'd no pictures up. Like, he'd kind of just, there was just like his profile picture, and I think maybe one or two kind of random pictures from here up. But anyway, we were chatting, and I have this kind of policy that I don't give out my phone number to anybody until I've met them in person. And if I feel then I want to give them my number, I will. So there was kind of messaging over and back. He seemed nice. And he was from Dublin, actually. So I had some kind of this is probably about 2 years ago, some kind of a family thing, actually, a dinner in Leixlip, I think, maybe. But anyway, I was going to meet him after the dinner. And so I was there on time or whatever, sat down, and I was kind of like, okay, I'll order myself a sparkling water. I was driving back to Galway. And the next thing, he sent me a message on Instagram saying I'm on my way. So I was like, oh, grand, I'm sitting, blah, blah, wherever I was sitting to the back of this pub. And the next thing, it was kind of like a little snug area that I deliberately sat in because just, so that I'd have a decent conversation. But I could see kind of right down through the centre of the pub, just beyond where I was sitting. And the next thing I could see kind of like I could see a guy that kind of resembled him. And there was like something like a sparkly thing on his neck. But as he started to approach me, I didn't know whether to look at his head or his shoes because first of all, I noticed like he had this kind of John Wayne swagger. And he was wearing like cowboy boots, like full on cowboy boots. And then he had this, so when he sat down, like he had this gold chain. Now it didn't have a medallion or anything, but it was one of those really thick, like what you'd see on, I don't know, Conor McGregor or somebody, like a thick gold chain. So between the chain and the boots, I was just totally distracted. So I was like, in my head, I was thinking, Denise, focus on the face. Just focus on the face.
I'd be like, I'm leaving.
These things sparkling. And I was just like, oh my God. So anyway, I said to him, I stayed for about an hour and I said, look, it was lovely to meet you. And, seemed like a really nice guy, but I'm not really sure we have very much in common. So,
Yeah. I remember when you told me that story first, which I just thought was hilarious. But I always think like every time you tell me that story, I'm thinking I just remember like Pat Mustard from Fourth of Ted, and I just have this image of this guy kind of like waltzing in and
yeah, he was literally like strutting and stuff. But the funny thing was, so he messaged me then afterwards. I don't know if you remember this part of the story. He messaged me like 2 days afterwards saying, look, really nice to meet you. Look, I know you said that, you weren't.
I know you don't like my boots, but I can buy a new pair.
What about a hookup? We're both single. What do you think? I was like, no thanks.
Yeah.
You're grand.
Yeah, some people are just very kind of like straightforward, and this is,
Yeah, but I had said to him, like that was very clear. It's not like I was kind of, maybe I might see you again. I was very clear,
Not interested.
But yeah, chanced his arm. So there you go. On that note, what do you think? This is our final question now because I seem desperate for going over time. So what do you think are the core things that make a good relationship? The core values that make a good relationship?
Honesty.
Yeah.
Intimacy.
Yeah.
For me, that means like emotional and physical.
Yeah.
And the last one would be, I think it's, can I rely on this person? Reliability.
Yeah.
I think everything else is kind of generic for me,
Okay.
They would be kind
so
of...
you'd work with the person on anything else.
Yeah.
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 It wouldn't get you down. Like if there was they'd be the main things.
I mean, I might not like it, but
but you could live with it.
Yeah. If I can trust that person 100% and I don't have to kind of be doubting them or wondering.
Yeah.
That like trust for me is a huge one.
Yeah.
Intimacy, obviously, because I have enough friends. I don't need any more friends. So I need that kind of intimacy from an emotional side and a physical side. And just being able to rely on the person. You know, do they keep their word? Like things like that. Everything else, I'd be quite happy if I had those. How about you?
Kind of similar, I guess. Loyalty. Yeah. Like huge one. Loyalty and feeling that I can trust somebody.
And that's really hard nowadays as well.
Yeah. physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, but also somebody that you can have decent conversations with, like not just intelligent conversations, but easy conversations and banter. Humor is a huge thing for me, you know, so like that there is kind of a banter and that it's not all serious and, you know, but I think.
What about fashion sense? no cowboy boots. Yeah. Decent shoe collection.
Yeah, but it's funny actually because a lot of people think because I'm into fashion or whatever that I, you know, super focused on that when it comes to guys. I'm not actually, you know, but equally,
I do like a guy that dresses as well, though. I have to admit.
I mean, absolutely. You know, who doesn't? But it's not a total deal breaker for me. Like, you know, if they haven't the best fashion sense,
you know, can buy them new clothes.
Exactly. But and I think just kind of good communicator, you know, somebody who you can have decent conversations with and who, another thing, that they accept personal responsibility, you know, that again, because again, I think because I see it so much coming up with couples that have difficulty in their relationships, that whole thing of blame shifting and kind of gaslighting the other person, making things out to be
it's your fault.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of you, I behave this way.
Instead of taking responsibility. So I think it's not healthy for me to not be able to discuss things. You know, I think I'd become unhealthy myself if I haven't got that place and space to kind of open up, you know, and there's not too many people that I would allow into that space. So I have to be able to feel like I can chat to the person in an open way and equally that they can talk back. So, they'd be
fair points.
The main ones. But and obviously a good sex life is always good. Yeah.
Helps.
So that's it. Is there anything, as my guest, is there anything that you'd like to, you think I was on my 10th year of recording podcast episodes. It's only my 4th episode, but what I have been doing with the 2 previous guests, what I've done with the 2 previous guests, if I've allowed the last word to rest with them. So is there anything that you would like to add to the conversation that you feel like the listeners might benefit from or that might be useful to them if they are maybe finding themselves in a spot of difficulty in terms of their intimate sex lives? What would you say to them?
Have more sex.
Yeah. Or get the support that you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody came up in a Q&A a while back and on my own Instagram was like, how do I get confident with sex? And I responded pretty much with a one-liner, have more of it. You know?
Yeah, and it's funny because like, it's like anything, I suppose, that I always say that people think that motivation has to precede activation, but it's the other way around. Motivation follows after you activate. So the more you do something, you know,
100%,
the more it kind of becomes like second nature. Yeah. And so you know.
And it's I always go back to it. So it's one of my mottos, nothing changes unless you change.
Yeah.
So and it goes back to what you said about taking responsibility. You have to take responsibility for your own life and your own actions and not be passing that on to somebody else and expecting them to kind of fulfill all your needs or make you happy. Yeah.
Good way to finish. So, do you want to let people know how they can find you or where they can find you?
Sure. So they can find me on Instagram, Therapy with Lynda, Lynda. Website, lyndaduffy.ie.
Brilliant. It's been great having you on the podcast.
It's been a pleasure.
And we're going to go now for a little Christmas bite to eat.
A Christmas drink.
And
go find some mint.
Catch it properly. Listen, thanks a million for coming in. Great to see you as always.
Been my pleasure.
And thanks so much. Great chat.
Thank you.
Cheers.